Welcome to the Turing test. Today's dive is all about that build versus buy conundrum in the AI space. Picture this. Your CEO slams the table and says, "We need AI in every product by next quarter."
Oh yeah, that high-pressure moment when you have to decide, do you spin up your own model, pull an open-source Llama off Hugging Face, or just, swipe the corporate card for GPT 4.0?
Exactly. And it's a real puzzle, right? It's like, a maze of decisions where every turn has its own costs and complexities.
Exactly.
We're untangling the build or buy knot that's rattling about in boardrooms everywhere.
For sure. And get this. According to A16Z's survey from June 10, 2025, 75% of enterprise CIOs plan on boosting Gen AI budgets this year. Not to mention, overall IT spend is creeping up, even if it's just 2%. Now that's some pressure.
Yep, it's high stakes. So let's get into these 5 key questions that boards are flinging at tech leads. First up, do you really need your own model?
Right. Look, building from scratch sounds so sexy in theory, but you recall how Bloomberg did it. They spent 2 years and an undisclosed 8-figure sum to roll out BloombergGPT back in March of 2023.
Exactly. And while that extreme expense might be worth it for a finance giant with oceans of proprietary data, it could be a major overkill for a mid-market retailer who's got a lot less scope and capital.
So for most companies, it makes more sense to walk the fine-tuned middle ground, as Gartner puts it. Start with a robust frontier model and just lightly customize it. It's like giving a high-performance car a few tweaks instead of building one from scratch.
Yeah, that's spot on. Take Morgan Stanley, for instance. When they launched AskResearchGPT in October 2024, they took OpenAI's horsepower, lightly tuned it, and ended up with a bot that 98% of their advisor teams use daily.
Right, exactly. Moving on to question 2. What's the real cost profile? A lot of folks get caught up debating token prices, but man, people cost more than compute, don't they?
Definitely. I mean, hiring even a modest model ops team, say 5 ML engineers, 2 data scientists, and 1 site reliability pro, can easily run you around $2 million a year in major US hubs. It's not just about the hardware, it's the talent and the ongoing ops.
Exactly. And don't forget the inference bills. That same A16Z survey mentioned a sticker shock curve when usage spikes. Teams now hedge risks with a multi-model stack. Use a premium model for complex reasoning, while an open-source model trimmed using LoRa handles routine tasks.
Yep, it's like having a Swiss Army knife of models. The premium one handles the big, complicated stuff, while the leaner ones tackle the everyday bits.
I can see that.
And then there's the embeddings index for quick searches.
All right, moving right along. Question 3. How sensitive is your data? In some cases, like when you're Coca-Cola crafting a slick ad campaign, you can toss stuff into the public cloud. But for industries like healthcare, shipping patient notes to an external API is a no-go, right?
Absolutely. For hospitals, you've got to be extra cautious with HIPAA regulations. That's why we're seeing a rise in sovereign deployments, using open-source models like Mistral 7B fine-tuned, hosted in a private VPC where data stays locked down.
Yep, totally. True. But there's a trade-off, isn't there? Sure, you avoid the data exposure risk, but now you own all the patching, red teaming, and compliance paperwork. It's like trading one set of headaches for another.
Right. And that brings us neatly to question 4. How fast do you need to move? APIs get you a prototype in a blink, and one CIO mentioned that what used to be a year's spending on AI is now being exhausted in just a week. Speed matters big time.
Yeah, but here's where I gotta challenge that a bit. I've seen cases where speed without any differentiation turns into a bit of a mirage. Imagine 5 different apps all spinning out a similar GPT wrapper. Eventually, users notice they're just the same every time.
That's a valid point. Speed is crucial, but if you're not offering something unique, you're just part of the noise. In response, even API-first companies often pivot to light fine-tuning or retrieval augmented generation, RAG. It's the secret sauce that transforms a generic prompt into a signature experience.
Definitely. And then we have the final question. Who's gonna run this thing next year? More specifically, the operational headaches. The build path locks you into an MLOps treadmill, model retraining, vector store hygiene, GPU allocations, hallucination audits, you name it.
Exactly. On the other hand, the buy option passes most of that responsibility to the vendor. But then you're tied to their release cycles and potential price hikes. It's basically a trade-off between control and convenience.
Some firms even try to get the best of both worlds. You know, they buy to learn in year one, using APIs from OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google, and then aim to build to own in year two once they see consistent patterns and requirements emerge.
That's the hybrid approach. And others remain agnostic forever, routing each user call through an orchestrator that benchmarks multiple models in real time and picks the best one. It's definitely a dynamic landscape.
Let's talk numbers for a moment. Suppose your SaaS app is making 10 million monthly completions at roughly 1,500 tokens each. If you use GPT-4o Mini at 70 cents per million tokens, your cost comes to around $450,000 a month. But, if you swap half those calls to something like Gemini 2.5 Flash at 26 cents per million tokens, you could slash the bill significantly, though you might lose some reasoning muscle.
Exactly. It's a real balancing act. And if you train your own mid-size model, you're staring at a seven-figure upfront training cost, plus ongoing expenses for GPU leases. That makes sense, only if you really scale past 30+ million calls a month, or if maintaining control and privacy is critical.
Right, so then we have a quick lightning checklist. First, does the Frontier API already nail your use case? Second, is data gravity an issue? Do you have sensitive data that can't leave your walls?
And third, what's the reality with ML talent? Can you actually hire and keep the experts needed to run your own stack? Fourth, consider the time pressure. Do you need features available yesterday, or can you iterate slowly? And finally, account for the total cost of ownership, factoring in people, hardware, and ongoing evaluations, not just token fees.
Some pro tips here. Don't treat build versus buy as a binary choice. It's more of a mix and match situation where you revisit your decisions quarterly. The model landscape is, so volatile that what was cheapest last quarter might be legacy this quarter.
Exactly right. And it's that agility and willingness to adapt that will separate the industry leaders from the followers. I mean, think about it. It's like having a toolbox where you swap out the tools as soon as you find a better one.
I like that analogy. One thing that really struck me is the sheer diversity of approaches. Some companies opt for a full in-house architecture, some go for hybrid models, and others simply rely on third-party vendors. It really shows there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Yup, and that diversity forces you to critically assess what you're trying to achieve. Are you chasing the cutting edge solely for its own sake, or are you focused on delivering a smooth, differentiated user experience? It's like the age-old build versus buy debate in software, but now with AI brainpower on top.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also the operational aftermath to consider. When you build in-house, you've got an ongoing commitment, model retraining, troubleshooting, scaling issues, and that inevitable maintenance overhead. At what point does that become unsustainable?
Right, and that's where the vendor solution shines. They absorb most of that risk. But as you mentioned earlier, you're then at the mercy of their pricing and update cycles. For instance, even if you switch models mid-year, your roadmap might end up chained to external release cycles, which can be quite
Could definitely be a double-edged sword. I do think, though, that there's an element of debate here. Some argue that relying too much on vendors stifles innovation. If you're just plugging into an API without understanding the underlying mechanics, you might be stuck with suboptimal performance in the long run.
True, and that's where I respectfully challenge that notion. While it's tempting to think that building in-house is always the more innovative path, the reality is that the pace of development on the vendor side is insane. They often have massive resources and can push out improvements much faster than a small in-house team ever could.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It really boils down to what's a strategic advantage versus what's a competitive vulnerability. You want to own what differentiates your product without drowning in operational complexities.
Exactly. And that's why this whole discussion isn't just about numbers or features, It's about aligning AI strategy with your overall business goals. It's the constant, balancing act between control, efficiency, speed, and cost.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, let's remind our listeners of that lightning checklist. Match the model to your use case, safeguard your data, weigh the talent versus compute equation, manage time pressure, and always factor in total cost of ownership.
Precisely. And remember, a build versus buy decision isn't set in stone. Reassess it periodically because the AI landscape is shifting almost daily. Mix, match, and adjust as you learn from each iteration.
Can't agree more. Well, that's our deep dive for today. If your exec team is still undecided on whether to build or buy, maybe send this episode their way. And heck, maybe even share your own spreadsheet of true costs.
Tomorrow, we're tackling agentic workflows and diving into why 2025 might be the year software starts running itself. It's going to be wild, so stay tuned and keep those comments coming, both the good and the critical ones.
Thanks for joining us on the Turing test. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.